In a world scarred by a devastating war, Earth has become a desolate wasteland known as the Forgotten Land. The last remnants of humanity cling to life within the walls of a single city, ruled by a ruthless king. Order is maintained by a powerful religious faction, controlling every aspect of life with an iron fist. One day, a woman named Gray is sentenced to death for using magic. Her execution is meant to be a brutal warning to anyone who dares defy the regime. But as the guards leave her to face her fate, Gray taps into her forbidden powers, manipulating the mind of one soldier. In a trance, he believes he is the one set to die. Confusion spreads, and in the case, the soldier accidentally shoots the rope holding Gray, sparing her life. Quick to act, Gray spots the soldier and instinctively fires a shot, only for the bullet to strike another guard. The leader of the guards, enraged, orders the execution of the soldier who was under the magic's influence and sends his forces on a relentless hunt to capture Gray. Shortly after, Gray moves like a shadow through the crumbling buildings, methodically taking out the soldiers one by one. She's quick, precise, until only the leader remains. Cornered, he dares her to kill him, but Gray has other plans. Instead of a quick death, she strangles him with a rope, her eyes cold. As she walks away, the crowd parts, whispering, "The witch who cannot be executed." Elsewhere, a wanderer named Boyce rides alone through a dark tunnel, a strange sense of being watched creeping over him. He calls out to the shadows, challenging whoever's there. In an instant, a group of ambushers appears. One tries to grab his weapon, but before they can react, the two-headed snake coiled around Boyce's arm strikes, killing the attacker instantly. Boyce summons his weapon with a swift gesture, effortlessly taking down the entire gang in a blur of motion. With the area secured, he retrieves his snake, undisturbed, and continues his journey. On the other hand, Gray finds refuge in a tower, offering some money to a blind woman who recognizes her from a past act of kindness. Just as she prepares to leave, they're visited by a queen and her captain, Terrorized. The queen, desperate for power, desires the ability to transform into a wolf and offers Gray a bounty of luxurious jewels in exchange. Gray, unfazed, agrees. But she won't just give her the power, she'll hire a hunter to slay the shape-shifting creature and take its power. The deadline is set, the next full moon, just 6 days away. Moments later, Gray was in the midst of preparing her weapons when Terrorized approached, his intentions unclear. He offered to hire her, but not for the job, she thought. It was revealed that Terrorized wanted Gray to stop the queen from obtaining the power to transform into a wolf. He claimed to be loyal to the queen, insisting that such power would only lead to ruin. Gray, sensing jealousy beneath his words, suspected his true motives, but never one to turn down a job, accepted the payment in the form of Terrorized's watch. Once he left, Gray tapped into her magic, peering into the Forgotten Land with her sight. She saw a group of men attempt to take down a massive wolf, only to be torn apart in seconds, their efforts nothing but a futile bloodbath. Meanwhile, the king lay in bed, his voice laced with frustration as he called for his wife's help. But the queen, clearly irritated, mocked him with biting words while summoning her servants. Then, in a surprising twist, she was caught in a passionate kiss with Boyce, revealing her secret affair. Boyce, attempting to sneak out of the palace, was caught by the royal guards. In a flash, he spat alcohol at a nearby torch, igniting a fiery explosion that burned one guard alive. With quick reflexes, he kicked another guard down the stairs, creating a momentary escape as chaos erupted around him. Not long after, in a rundown bar, Gray eyed Boyce from across the room. She knew his reputation. His deep knowledge of the Forgotten Land made him the perfect hunter for the task ahead. She approached him, offering a job, but Boyce was more interested in the game of chance he was caught up in. With no other option, Gray sat down and joined the game. In the first round, she wiped the floor with him, her skill undeniable. Boyce grumbled but began to reconsider her offer after she made it clear. If he slowed her down, he could walk away at any time. It was then that Boyce spoke up. He told her about a giant wolf that prowled the treacherous Skull River, a place that matched the vision Gray had seen earlier. That was all the confirmation she needed. She agreed to pay him with Terrorized's watch if he would guide her there. However, chaos erupted when a group of soldiers stormed the bar. A shot rang out from the upper floor, but Boyce was quicker. With a flick of his wrist, he sent his snake flying, taking out the shooter before he could get another shot off. The body crashed to the floor, and the snake latched onto the arm of another soldier, sending his comrade into a panic. In a desperate move, the soldier severed his own arm to free the snake. But just as the situation seemed to calm, the enforcer arrived. With a single fluid motion, she killed the snake, its lifeless body hitting the floor. However, by the time she turned to confront Gray and Boyce, they had already vanished into the shadows. Meanwhile, at a place of worship, the religious leader reminded the congregation of the law that all witches and heretics must be judged. As the prayers continued, the congregation quietly slipped pamphlets into each other's hands, their messages of resistance hidden beneath the surface. After the service, the religious leader's true knowledge came to light. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was fully aware of the underground movement and saw Gray as a symbol of defiance. Soon, the enforcer dragged in the blind woman for interrogation, stomping on her hand until she cried out, confessing that Gray had been visited by Gerace and the Queen. The patriarch, cold and calculating, gave the order: find Gray, make her confess she had deceived the city's leader, and execute her by hanging. Meanwhile, Gray and Boyce set up camp in the desolate, forgotten land, the harsh landscape stretching out around them. Along the way, Boyce searched for a new snake to add to his collection, but came up empty-handed. As night fell, the tension in the air thickened. Boyce approached Gray, sword drawn, his intentions unclear. Gray, always alert, flashed her knife in defense, but Boyce was only trying to protect her from a deadly scorpion lurking nearby. The next day, they arrived at a trade post run by two siblings, Mara and Ross, old friends of Boyce. As they exchanged greetings, Boyce explained that they had a week to find the shapeshifter. But Gray was determined to finish the task in just a few days. Boyce, ever the risk-taker, agreed to a dangerous shortcut. As they prepared to leave the next morning, Boyce gave a sharp warning. Only Mara and Ross could be trusted in the Forgotten Land. However, Gray, scanning the area, spotted something unsettling: large animal bones locked in a cage, a clear sign of danger lurking nearby. Elsewhere, the enforcer and her soldiers rumbled through the forbidden territories in an armored carriage, their mission clear. Meanwhile, the Queen confronted the patriarch, fury burning in her eyes. She demanded to know why he had authorized the use of the carriage without consulting her and, worse, left the city unguarded. The patriarch, calm but calculating, retorted that he suspected betrayal on her side. The Queen vehemently denied it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Soon after, the patriarch reached out to the enforcer, confirming his suspicions that the Queen had lied. Now, they had to capture Gray. With her gone, and if the ailing king died soon, the patriarch would finally have the power to seize control. Elsewhere, Ross and Mara, unsuspecting and loyal, were found by a brutal group of soldiers. They were tortured without mercy until, unable to withstand the pain, Mara broke. She gasped out the truth. Gray and Boyce were headed toward Skull River. The soldiers, cold and efficient, killed them both and set their home ablaze, leaving nothing but smoke and ashes in their wake. The next day, Gray and Boyce arrived at the Rift, an ancient city marked by deep ravines and crumbling buildings. They ventured into one of the dilapidated structures, searching for the operator of the cable car, their only way to cross the vast ravine. Boyce called out the name of the man who typically ran the cable car, but there was no response. As they moved deeper into the building, they stumbled upon the grim sight of the operator's lifeless body. He had been executed, a clear sign that the enemy had beaten them there. Just as they were about to leave, they were ambushed by the enforcer and her soldiers. Coldly, she offered Boyce safety in exchange for Gray's surrender. To drive the point home, the soldiers unveiled the lifeless body of Mara. But to everyone's shock, Mara's eyes fluttered open, weakly calling Boyce's name. In a cruel twist, the enforcer shot her without hesitation, silencing any hope of her survival. Fury surged through Boyce, and without thinking, he fired back. Gray, moving like lightning, closed the distance, taking down one soldier and grabbing his weapon. The two fought in perfect sync, taking down enemies with ruthless efficiency. But just as they thought they'd had the upper hand, a second wave of soldiers emerged from the carriage, charging at them with brutal force. A fierce battle erupted once more. Gray and Boyce fought desperately to hold their ground, but the sheer number of enemies kept increasing. Soon, Gray ran out of ammunition. and the situation grew even more dire. They tried to make a run for it, but the enemy's carriage opened fire with cannons, forcing them to dodge and tumble out of the way. With no other choice, Boyce yanked the cable car's latch, sending it sliding across the chasm as the soldiers pressed on, hot on their heels. As the car began its crossing, one soldier lunged to board, but his desperate attempt ended in disaster as he plunged to his death into the deep ravine below. But the danger wasn't over. A few enemies had managed to climb onto the roof, and Gray wasted no time, scaling the car to meet them head-on. With lightning-fast reflexes, she took down most of them in mere seconds, her movements fluid and precise. She cornered the last soldier against the narrow side of the car, and in a swift strike, she severed his hand. He screamed as he tumbled over the edge, falling into the abyss below. Inside the car, Boyce was still fighting off the remaining soldiers. The odds were turning against them, and the enforcer, watching her forces falter, barked an order. One of her subordinates quickly moved to cut the cable. The car lurched violently, tilting at a dangerous angle, and Gray was forced to use her knife as a makeshift support, barely holding her ground. Boyce reacted fast, smashing a window and hurling a soldier out, but the enforcer wasn't done yet. She aimed and fired at the remaining cable, severing it with deadly accuracy. The cable car dropped, plummeting through the air, crashing into the side of the ravine, armamenting as it careened through the buildings. Gray and Boyce wasted no time. As the cable car plummeted, they scrambled up the stone wall, desperate to escape before the fall became fatal. Just as they neared the top, the enforcer's shot rang out. Boyce cried out as the bullet struck his shoulder, but Gray had already reached the peak. In a flash, she used her powers to distract the enforcer, buying them the precious moments they needed to escape. That night, hidden away in their makeshift refuge, Boyce gritted his teeth and pulled the bullet from his shoulder. Gray worked swiftly and carefully, stitching the wound with practiced hands. As she worked, Boyce's mind wandered. A heavy silence filled the air as he thought of the friends he'd lost and the vengeance that now burned within him. He swore to make the enforcer pay for everything she had taken from him. Before sleep claimed them both, they stared up at the skison, its strange, flickering lights casting an eerie glow full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. The next morning, the queen stood before the mirror, her face pale but resolute. She had just learned she was pregnant. The child was Boyce's, but she kept her secret, deciding to tell no one. The king's frailty was undeniable, and with a chilling calm, she approached him, her mind already set. She pressed a pillow to his face, silencing him forever, ending his life with a single, calculated move. After a long journey, Gray and Boyce arrived at Shadow's Bane, a region infamous for its deadly creatures that emerged after nightfall. The air was thick with tension when the unmistakable sound of the enforcer's carriage broke the silence. With no time to escape, they sought refuge in a decaying tower. Inside, they quickly dropped gas canisters, setting the stage for their desperate stand. As the night grew darker and the lights flickered on, the demons began to stir, their grotesque figures emerging from the shadows and surrounding them. Boyce wasted no time, striking a match and tossing it toward the realm, creating a wall of fire that encircled them. But the creatures, relentless and undeterred, used metal plates as bridges, crossing over the flames with ease. In a moment of desperation, Boyce kicked a gas canister toward the edge and shot it, triggering a massive explosion that sent several demons crashing to the ground. One demon, faster than the rest, lunged toward Boyce. In a swift motion, Gray drove her sword into its chest, dragging it away from him. The battle intensified as more creatures closed in from all sides. Without hesitation, Gray leapt forward, meeting the next demon head-on, her sword cutting through the air in a blur. At the same time, Boyce drove the metal rod deep into the demon's chest, impaling it with a swift, powerful strike. Meanwhile, Gray launched a knife toward a nearby gas canister, the blade sinking into it just as the canister erupted in a massive explosion. The blast drew the attention of the demon leaders perched above, watching from the shadows. Without warning, their leader descended, flanked by his followers, his voice booming across the battlefield. He called Gray by name, his words dripping with menace as he warned her that this place was not for her. Gray's eyes narrowed, her focus unwavering. In an instant, she summoned her magical powers, calling forth a firestorm that engulfed the ring of flames. The fire swirled, expanding into a massive vortex of searing heat, incinerating every creature in its path, including the demon leader himself. As the smoke cleared and the battle ended, Boyce stood in stunned silence, his breath steady despite the carnage. But then it hit him. He hadn't felt the heat from the flames. Confused, he turned to Gray. She explained calmly that the fire was nothing but an illusion, a mind trick that made the demons believe they were burning alive, their bodies succumbing to the suggestion before they died. She went on to reveal that this place, once a site of immense power, had attracted a group of treasure hunters who had tried to claim it. Their expedition ended in tragedy. Those who entered the forgotten ruins didn't return as men. They became the very monsters they had fought. Elsewhere, the patriarch stood before the gathered citizens, his voice cold and commanding, as he announced the death of the king and declared that the queen was pregnant. The child would be the rightful heir to the throne. The crowd's response was lackluster, their apathy palpable. But Juraeus, ever the enforcer, fired a shot into the air, the sharp crack of the bullet cutting through the silence. With a grim smile, he urged the people to cheer and support. And they did, reluctantly, their shouts hollow under the weight of the patriarch's iron will. The patriarch, with a carefully calculated display, showed his public support for the queen. But beneath his facade, he held nothing but contempt for her, secretly plotting her downfall. In the shadows, he summoned the enforcer, urging her to act swiftly, his mind already on the next step in his ruthless power play. Meanwhile, the queen played her own game, using her charm to manipulate Juraeus. She flattered him, weaving her influence over him to secure military power for her personal gain, all while keeping her true intentions hidden behind her smile. On the other hand, Boyce and Gray continued their journey toward the fire fields, with Boyce assuring her they would reach their destination the next day. Yet Gray, ever cautious, warned him of the dangers ahead. Facing a shapeshifter was no small task, and she suggested he take his payment and leave while he still had the chance. But Boyce refused, determined to stay by her side. The following day, as they navigated a dark tunnel, the distant sound of an approaching carriage grew louder. With no time to escape, they quickly devised a plan. Gray stepped onto the tracks, luring the carriage toward her. As it closed in, she sprinted, leading the enforcer into the trap. Unaware, the enforcer chased her down, unaware that Gray was heading for a section of the tracks that was damaged. At the last possible moment, Gray leaped, and Boyce, anticipating her move, caught her midair, just as the carriage rushed toward the broken tracks. The carriage rushed uncontrollably, unable to stop as it plunged into the ravine below. The explosion that followed was violent and deafening, consuming the enforcer and her entire crew in a fiery death. Word of the disaster quickly reached the patriarch. Furious, he scrambled to rally his forces, eager to seize power by force. But before his plan could unfold, Juraeus and his troops arrived. They surrounded the patriarch's forces, swiftly eliminating them all. With one final ruthless strike, the queen became the sole ruler of the city. The following day, Gray and Boyce finally reached Skull River, a grim and eerie place littered with the bones of countless victims, those who had fallen prey to the savage creatures that roamed the land. They ventured into an old abandoned building where the faint remnants of life still lingered. Though it was clear someone had once lived there, no one appeared. Boyce, unwettled, suggested they leave, but Gray remained resolute, determined to continue her mission. As night began to fall, Gray readied herself, slipping silver claw covers onto her fingers, prepared for the dangers that awaited them. Boyce tried once more to dissuade her, but it was too late. The full moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting an eerie glow across the land. That's when the unimaginable happened. Boyce's body began to twist and change. His muscles grew rapidly, his clothes tearing apart as he transformed into a massive wolf-like creature. Gray realized Boyce was a shapeshifter, and the thought that he might have led her here to end her life sent a chill down her spine. In a quick, fluid motion, she threw his watch at him, then drew her silver weapon, preparing for the fight. But Boyce, now in his monstrous form, was far stronger. With a single, effortless strike, he sent Gray flying, knocking her back with terrifying ease. Knowing she had to survive, Gray conjured an illusion. A flock of large birds swooped down, attacking Boyce and giving her a brief window to hide. As Boyce leapt toward the birds, ready to tear them apart, the illusion flickered and vanished. Gray seized the moment, plunging her silver claws deep into his side. Boyce tried to fight back, but his strength was fading fast. With each strike, Gray wore him down until finally he collapsed. Boyce raised his hand in surrender as Gray stood over him, preparing to finish the battle. But before she could deliver the final blow, he passed out, his body too battered to resist. When Boyce regained consciousness, his body was covered in deep wounds and bruises. Gray offered him water, urging him to rest. He fell asleep, but when he awoke again, he found himself shackled. It was then that he realized what Gray had done. While stitching his wounds, she had slipped small pieces of silver under his skin. The poison was already working its way through his body. Not long after, Gray stood over Boyce, ready to end it, but he stopped her with one last request. Reminding her of the rule she was bound to, never refuse a request, Boyce confessed his wish. He wanted them to stay together, to hunt as partners and end the loneliness that had plagued them both for so long. Gray hesitated, then agreed, though she hinted that such an arrangement would come at a high cost. As the words hung in the air, the clouds parted, and the moonlight bathed the land once more. Boyce's body began to change again, his form shifting uncontrollably. Gray, recognizing what was happening, prepared herself. With swift precision, she began to fight him again, determined to end his suffering once and for all. The next morning, Gray stood alone, placing Boyce's watch on his grave as a final tribute. She turned and walked away, carrying the skin of her fallen companion, a silent burden. When she reached the city, the slaves spotted her and erupted in a roar of fervent recognition. Their cries echoed through the streets, and though the guards tried to contain the chaos, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. The rebels, fueled by fury, tore down the massive cross that had once stood proudly atop the city's church. Amid the chaos, Gray handed Boyce's fur to Gerace, delivering the message that the queen would gain the power hidden within it. Gerace, his eyes narrowing, pointed out that Gray had failed to complete her mission. Calmly, Gray responded that by killing Boyce, the queen's lover, she had indirectly paved the way for Gerace to possess her, fulfilling his long-hidden desire. But when the queen saw the fur Gray had brought, a shockwave hit her. The realization struck hard that this was Boyce's skin. From the beginning, she had dreamed of transforming into a creature like him so they could live together forever. Instead, Gerace, in a bitter turn of fate, accused Boyce of ruining her life. Betrayed by everyone, the queen snapped. She seized her hairpin and drove it into Gerace's neck, his life extinguished in an instant. Outside, the rebels seized their moment. The palace guards, overwhelmed by the sheer force of the uprising, were unable to hold their ground. Shots rang out, but it was futile. The rebels stormed the palace, the weight of their numbers unstoppable. As the first light of dawn broke, the queen stood over Boyce's fur, watching as it burned to ash, the flames devouring the remnants of his skin. But as the sun rose higher, an eerie tremor ran through Boyce's grave. Something unnatural stirred beneath the earth. Moments later, Boyce rose from the grave, reborn, his body driven by a burning thirst for vengeance. His eyes scanned the horizon, his mind focused solely on Gray. When they finally came face to face, Gray spoke first, revealing the truth she had carried for so long. She had known about the relationship between Boyce and the queen from the beginning. Every move she had made, every step of the chaos in the city, and the uprising itself had been part of a grand plan, one meant to free the people and ensure Boyce's survival. But Boyce, consumed by rage, couldn't accept her words. He aimed his weapon at her, but the gun jammed, leaving him with no choice but to pull a knife. The two clashed, their movements a blur of fury and desperation. For a moment, they were locked in a deadly standoff, swords at each other's throats, the tension thick enough to choke the air between them. Gray's voice cut through the silence, reminding Boyce that this moment, this deadly confrontation, was the fate he had chosen. Boyce fell into silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Slowly his anger waned, and with a reluctant nod, he lowered his weapon. In that moment, a mutual understanding passed between them. Together they would leave the wreckage behind and set off on a new journey into the mysterious and untamed land known as the Lost Land. And so their story came to an end. So the moral of the story is, if you're ever planning to fight someone who's also a shapeshifter, maybe bring a silver knife, just in case your magic powers and charm don't do the trick.